how important is the use of illustrations? Are they simply fluff in our teaching? One definition of the English word fluff is this: something essentially trivial and lacking importance or solid worth.
I just absolutely love how Kenneth Flodin, one of my favorite speakers of the Jehovah's Witness religion, starts his speech by telling you that you should avoid fluff, and then waste time telling you what fluff is, because it's not like it's a common word and defining it would just amount to fluff itself. This is how the JW broadcasting of August 2023 starts, and as you'll see, it's all about the Jehovah's Witness favorite, illustrations.
All these things Jesus spoke to the crowds by illustrations. Indeed, without an illustration, he would not speak to them. We often call Jesus the great teacher. Illustrations were essential to fully grasp what was being taught. Now, we won't be spending a lot of time on the do's and don'ts of using illustrations. Insight on the Scriptures has a whole topic on illustrations. And the Apply Yourself to Reading and Teaching brochure has some helpful suggestions in Lesson 8.
Illustrations are, for some reason, an inherent part of the Jehovah's Witness religion. Since Jesus used parables and even puns to teach, the Jehovah's Witnesses take that as literal gospel. And they decide that absolutely everything needs an illustration when, in reality, rarely anything does. I remember dating a non-Jehovah's Witness woman in my early 20s who complained about my constant use of metaphors because I didn't know, but I was a deeply indoctrinated Jehovah's Witness who, like them, believed every point I made needed a useless and sometimes condescending illustration. And I believe that because of talks like these, making metaphors sound like the one elevated way of teaching. They're even worried about not having an illustration ready to go when they're indoctrinating someone.
What if we're teaching a Bible student and he asks us an unexpected question? At that moment, you'll likely mentally consider your student, what you know about his work, his hobbies, or just his daily life experiences, and an illustration may come to your mind on the spur of the moment.
And Jehovah's Witnesses obviously think this is exactly how Jesus taught, because he sometimes came up with illustrations that weren't prepared in advance.
In John chapter 4, his account about the Samaritan woman at the well. John 4:34, Jesus used the illustration of food. He said there, "My food is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work." That's a simple, effective illustration. Why might he have used the generic expression food instead of something more specific like my wine or my bread is to do the will of him who sent me? Well, let's look at the context. Interestingly, in quick succession, Jesus used two different illustrations, and in both cases, it seems from the context, that he came up with these based on what was happening at the time. John 4:7 says, "A woman of Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, 'Give me a drink.'" Well, that's setup number one for an illustration about water. Verse 8 says, "For his disciples had gone off into the city to buy food." That's setup number two for an illustration about food. Now, Jesus didn't orchestrate all of this in advance. It was just circumstantial that Jesus asked a woman who approached with a water jar to give him a drink.
Look into the amount of things they have to read into the very few words that Jesus spoke instead of focusing on what Jesus said. This is typical of Jehovah's Witnesses. Even the few of their core doctrines that actually appear in the Bible only do so cosmetically, like here. The story isn't about Jesus teaching how to teach, and in fact, other than giving superpowers to people, he rarely told people how to teach because he was there to teach and everyone else to listen. Jehovah's Witnesses arrogantly place themselves into the position of Jesus by trying to imitate how they think he taught, instead of teaching what he taught. And Flodin is about to read us something that Jesus did that makes him sound like he didn't even know how to teach to start with.
Meanwhile, the disciples were urging him, "Rabbi, eat." The word eat caused Jesus to think of the now famous illustration that we quote regularly. Verse 32, but he said to them, I have food to eat that you do not know about. Well, the disciples are puzzled. Verse 33, so the disciples said to one another, no one brought him anything to eat, did he? Jesus, picking up on the topic at hand, said to them, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and finish his work. Now, obviously, Jesus did not choreograph all this in advance, but based on the circumstances at hand, he came up with illustrations that worked.
No, it didn't work. The disciples were clearly puzzled with what Jesus said because it had nothing to do with what they were doing. A good teacher has to find the right moment to teach. If someone is blurting a metaphor that leaves people confused, that's a bad teacher, not a good one. And this is the example Jehovah's Witnesses are taught to follow. And Kenneth is about to let Jehovah's Witnesses know how they are supposed to think so they can achieve this pointless and condescending practice.
Is there a way to train the brain to think in illustration mode? Yes. How? One way is by observing creation or man-made inventions, even when you don't have a talk to give, even when your children are not with you. Think about what you observe and reason out how it could be applied as a teaching lesson in the future. Write it down if you need to so as to remember it. One father told me that even when his children were not with him, he would look at creation and come up with a line of reasoning that might be helpful in the future. And he gave an example. He observed two kittens playing together. He reasoned, do those kittens look happy? Yes. If Jehovah knows what it takes to make two kittens happy, do you think he knows what it would take to make you happy? Well, obviously, a child would agree. So if Jehovah knows what it would take to make you happy, what should you do if Jehovah says to do something a certain way? Profound, Dad. Do it Jehovah's way if you want to be happy.
Yes, a child would agree because it's bad logic and a child is unlikely to pick up on it. This is the second half of the coin. Most Jehovah's Witnesses use illustration to justify their terrible logic. In fact, Jehovah's Witnesses are likely to believe something is true as long as they can explain it with an illustration, using the illustration as a way to rationalize their bad practices, like following the religion blindly instead of explaining them. Once you actually follow the illustration through, you realize that the logic doesn't add up. If you left those kittens out on the street, they have less than a 50% chance of surviving to an adult life. So either Jehovah fucked up and we have to come in and fix it, or Jehovah doesn't care about making kittens or anyone else happy. And what Jehovah's Witnesses consider illustrations is pretty up to their interpretation.
Jesus' brain thought creatively when using illustrations. For another example, please turn with me to John 1:42. Jesus changed Simon's name on the spot. John 1:42. And he, Andrew, led him, Simon, to Jesus. When Jesus looked at him, he said, "You are Simon, the son of John. You will be called Cephas," which is translated Peter.
That's right. Jehovah's Witnesses rely so much on illustration, they pretend Jesus was doing an illustration when he changed someone's name, when that's neither an illustration nor the point of the story. And if you follow that bad logic, then the book of Revelation is also filled not only with visions, but with illustrations.
At Revelation 1:1, under inspiration to John, Jehovah said that that book of the Bible was a revelation by Jesus Christ, which God gave to him. The Insight book says, the book of Revelation concludes the Holy Scriptures with one of the most outstanding concentrations of illustrations found in the entire Bible. You recall our theme is Matthew 13:34. Without an illustration, he would not speak to them.
You thought I was joking? Not at all. Since the Bible says that Jesus spoke with illustrations, and since it also says that the book of Revelation originated from Jesus, then all of the weird esoteric visions were actually Jesus' illustrations. It's insane how long they can stretch the Bible to agree with their outdated and ineffective teachings and tactics. But fortunately, we can move on to a dramatization, basically a fanfic that Jehovah's Witnesses write because these scenarios don't actually happen. Otherwise, they'd be doing a recreation, not a dramatization.
Okay, and everything bagel with cream cheese and a large slutty. $8.50.
Oh, I think I forgot my purse.
Not my problem.
Come on, I'm here all the time. I've been waiting forever.
And yet, still not my problem.
Are you serious? I can bring you the money after work.
Next customer.
Sorry, how much was her order?
$8.50.
Oh, I've got it. And could you add a regular coffee with cream?
Fine. 12 even.
Do I know you?
Nope, I just wanted to help.
Thank you.
Of course.
How can I get your money to you?
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Okay, thank you.
This is how Jehovah's Witnesses see the world, as horrible and out to get you. But I've been in the same situation as the theft victim, where I reach to pay for my order and I realize I don't have money, or even more embarrassing, my card gets rejected due to lack of funds. And although this has happened to me in more than one country, almost every time I've been saved by some stranger who jumped to my help like they were waiting for the moment to do so. Either someone who's also waiting to pay, or the cashier themselves just telling me not to worry about it and leaving me feeling terrible because I never know what to do when people are kind to me. Any of those people deserve more praise than this Jehovah's Witness, because none of them expected anything in return. This Jehovah's Witness, however, cannot do a good deed without trying to use it as an icebreaker to try to push her religion into someone.
Thanks. But if you'd like a little something encouraging to read on your way to work, you might enjoy this.
I don't believe in God.
May I ask why?
I just don't. Thanks again. You're very sweet.
Okay. How many years in the camp?
11.
Will anyone else in your family be requesting resettlement?
No.
Why?
They are all dead. Killed.
I need a copy of your identity card.
Hey, I saw you.
No! We don't hire foreigners! You ruined your country! Don't come here and ruin ours! Get out!
As I said before, this only happens in these dramatizations, never in real life. The preaching work is so ineffective that Jehovah's Witnesses have to create a fanfic where an immigrant is a victim of hatred, gets a witness, and she rejects it like everyone else, only to accept it later in the day for no reason. In reality, no one will ever approach the cult even after their worst day, because no one wants to talk about the Bible even when they are refreshed, let alone after a long day. This dramatization makes no sense because we're not given absolutely any reason for the woman to approach the cart after being mistreated. She just kinda knows she's supposed to do that because she's in a Jehovah's Witness drama, I guess. But these are the straws that they're desperately grasping onto, showing a dramatization where the person, like every single other person, rejects the Jehovah's Witness message, only to change her mind when the witness is gone, to manipulate witnesses into believing the preaching work is effective, even if they're seeing with their own eyes it isn't. But by now, it's time for the Jehovah's Witnesses to put their baseball hat backwards and try to connect with the youth.
I went to a vocational school where I was able to fast-track learning a trade. Unexpectedly, I finished at the top of my class. After that, my teachers and my classmates started to expect a lot more from me. They were saying, "You're doing so well. You represent the school. You will have to work hard. You'll do great things. You'll go far." They were constantly putting pressure on me to go for higher education and to go to university.
There was this girl in high school who was my age. She was very friendly. She always paid attention to me. She was a nice person. I also thought she was cute. My classmates were like, "Go, talk to her." Or, "Hey, Isaac, do you know that she likes you?"
These are the two main challenges that these young-looking 20-year-olds are said to have faced: pressure at school to do well and to date other people. In almost any other religion, these two situations wouldn't have been an issue. However, it is definitely an issue in the Jehovah's Witness religion. Being a Jehovah's Witness is like being in a relationship with a narcissist who forbids you to hang out with anyone because they're afraid others manipulate you the same way they are. Take the girl saying she was pressured to do well in school. Isn't that what you are supposed to do in school? You get motivated by others to do better and even to represent the school as the best it has to offer, not for the school's sake, but for your sake. The Jehovah's Witness religion sees this and says, no, the only organization you can represent is us, because the religion, unlike the school, gets directly benefited by you deciding to work for free for it. Same thing with the guy and his crush. His classmates are portrayed as pushy and manipulative the same way the religion is, whereas they probably were simply excited to hear that his crush was reciprocated and were motivating him to take the next steps into starting a relationship that would make him happy, not his schoolmates. But obviously, both the school and the schoolmates have to be demonized, pressuring good Jehovah's Witnesses to improve their lives, not because they want to see them happy, but because they're bullying them and using peer pressure to manipulate them into behaving a certain way, because that's the only form of control this religion knows.
When I prayed to Jehovah, I didn't feel completely comfortable. I thought, if I'm not doing what Jehovah is asking of me, if I'm not behaving how Jehovah expects me to behave, then how can I expect him to listen to my prayers or even consider them?
My family never told me to go or not to go to university, but they reminded me of Jehovah's thinking.
My dad read Proverbs 27 verse 11 to me. What I was doing was a barrier between me and Jehovah. He helped me see that the decisions I make as a teenager affect Jehovah.
At that time, there were many videos, articles, and publications about this topic. Reading experiences of those who went through similar things, doing personal study on the subject, and talking with spiritually mature brothers while in the ministry was very helpful for me.
Something that my parents did that helped me a lot was that they used the book Young People Ask in our family study. And there's a chapter that talks about peer pressure.
Notice how the girl says that her parents didn't push her to do something about higher education, but show her Jehovah's thinking, which is obviously absent from the Bible, but very available in Jehovah's Witnesses publications, which let you know that Jehovah doesn't like it when you go to university. Don't ask why. If the father of this lady was an elder, and she had decided to go to higher education, her father would have been probably publicly removed as an elder for promoting this kind of thinking among the congregation, as a recent video leaked by Warwick Pimo shows us.
Considering this matter regarding Brother Brown and the impact that his family situation is having on the congregation. I asked you brothers to review his qualifications as an elder. After we spoke, and Brother Brown had an opportunity to explain to me some of the decisions that he's made for his family. I'm aware that you brothers have considered this matter before, but since then, another one of Brother Brown's daughters have enrolled in a school for higher education, which raises questions as to how this affects the congregation.
It is true. Some of the congregation have been negatively affected. They've been disturbed by the example of your daughters pursuing higher education. You've openly talked about wanting the best life for your daughters. And this has given some the impression that the only way to get the best life, it's not through spiritual things, but through secular pursuits. Some of the congregation are even confused about what the organization has stated regarding pursuing higher education. In fact, Sister Single's daughter is considering pursuing higher education because of the example of your daughters.
And just because the brothers and sisters have not approached you about this matter doesn't mean that they're not disturbed by what they see. They understand that it's a personal decision and that's something that you have to decide, but it still doesn't mean that your freeness of speech is not affected. In fact, the freeness of speech of the entire body of elders, as well as how successful we are as shepherds, has been affected as well. As Brother Anderson mentioned, when we promote the full-time ministry as the best way of life, this situation has now influenced how some of the congregation set that as a goal or even want to set that as a goal for their life.
Notice paragraph 30 discusses when a member of an appointed man's household pursues higher education, and paragraph 32, which outlines the procedure for reviewing the qualifications of such a man. Now, what are your observations? Brother Williams, please.
Brother Brown has served faithfully for many years. But the question that's within paragraph number 30 is important. how is he viewed by the congregation? Sad to say, the actions of his family have caused him to lose the respect of the congregation. In fact, some publishers have mentioned that if they need scriptural advice on family life, they'll just talk to another elder.
An appointed brother's children pursue higher education. Does his life pattern show that he puts kingdom interests first in his life? I don't think any of us can honestly say that Brother Brown's family is viewed as putting kingdom interests first in their life. Their conversations aren't spiritual, and I don't think the family, the wife, or the daughters have ever regular or auxiliary pioneered.
Does the pursuit of higher education interfere with regular meeting attendance, meaningful participation in field service, or other theocratic activities? His girls are not visible in the ministry, and because of their class schedule, they rarely are at meetings. It's obvious that spiritual things have become second place in their life.
I'm disappointed to say it, but I feel like we should recommend his deletion. I don't think we can say that he continues to have freeness of speech or that he's an example in presiding over his family.
I agree. In addition, he's neither peaceable or reasonable when things don't go his way.
All in favor of this recommendation? Okay, it's unanimous.
This very clearly lets us know that her going to university isn't a matter of conscience. It's a matter of manipulating her into not wanting to go so she doesn't ask questions. Because in reality, there are no good reasons to not go to university if you want to. And the same thing goes for the guy. He has to be manipulated into believing it's up to him to not date this girl he likes. Because if he does, then Jehovah will turn his back on him and never listen to another one of his prayers. Peer pressure at its finest.
Now I was sure about what I needed to do.
I had to speak to her. One day I prayed to Jehovah and got up the courage. I told her that it couldn't continue with us.
Of course, explaining that to my classmates and to my teachers was a little hard. I mean, it was difficult for them to understand. Sure, I explained it, but they said, "Why would you do that?"
For whoever is in the same situation that I was in, the best thing to do is to talk to someone you trust, tell them how you feel, and ask for help.
Notice how they're asked why they changed their minds, and they can't come up with a coherent answer. They have to do it because their religion told them to, but they aren't allowed to say that. So they simply skip over that and get surprised when other people can follow their logic, because to them, it isn't about logic. It's about obedience.
In the 1950s, the Watchdog Bible and Tract Society printed the first Bible ever to be translated by Jehovah's Witnesses, the New World Translation of the Holy Scriptures. At least, we thought it was the first Bible ever to be translated by Jehovah's Witnesses.
Well, in the fall of 2017, the World Headquarters Museum Department received a Bible donated by a brother in Germany. Accompanying the Bible was a letter referring to a rare Bible printed in 1934 at Magdeburg, the location of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society's Germany branch and printer at that time. Little was known about this Bible. And to those who did know of it, it was thought of as something unapproved by the then president of the society, J.F. Rutherford.
This is a segment that has absolutely nothing to do with the Bible and everything to do with the Jehovah's Witnesses' masturbatory sense of achievement. In here, they talk about a Bible translation that they did before their terrible New World Translation in Germany, which would make it their first Bible mistranslation. Who cares? Well, no one really. This is an obscure and completely trivial story about the religion, but it does include a time of their history when they were being persecuted by the Germans. So, to them, this is perfect indoctrination material.
By 1934, Adolf Hitler's campaign against Jehovah's Witnesses was well underway. Our religious activities were banned, 65 tons of literature had been seized and burned by Nazi authorities, and the branch office and printery at Magdeburg had already been confiscated and released several times. And this may explain why the Magdeburger Bible doesn't have a typical publisher's page listing of who published it, who translated, when and where it was printed. But on the bottom of one of the last pages, there is just one line in small letters, and it reads, "Printed, Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, Magdeburg." Interestingly, on September 13, 1934, the Ministry of the Interior of the German government granted permission for the Magdeburg office to resume the printing and distribution of Bibles. However, everybody knew that the facilities could be shut down again, perhaps permanently at any time. What really could be accomplished in the limited time they had?
The Magdeburg office informed Rutherford that they had possession of a New Testament manuscript ready for printing, and additionally a translation of the Old Testament was nearly complete. In October 1934, Rutherford approved the printing of 100,000 copies, but time was running out.
Brother Rutherford received the following letter dated August 6, 1935, and it says, "In the afternoon of July 10th, a number of officials of the secret police of Berlin and Magdeburg appeared and sealed the factory, rooms and offices at Magdeburg, closed all factory rooms, attached the property and money of the society. Several thousand Bibles were just being bound and the rest is printed." Sadly, only a small number of those Bibles actually made it out of the printery.
In November 2017, after a careful search, we were able to obtain 3 copies of the Magdeburger Bible. Little did we know what a treasured place in our organization's history of Bible translation and printing this Bible deserves.
This Bible, like every other Bible they've made, lacks any information about who translated it, making it completely useless in the study of the Bible because you don't know the qualifications of the people translating anything. The Jehovah's Witnesses, however, believe their anointed elders are more than qualified to translate the Bible, leading to a terrible Bible that leans heavily toward Jehovah's Witness narrative and is plain mistranslated in multiple areas. And this Green Bible is just a proto-version of that, a useless mistranslation that is only important in their religion because everything their religion does is amazing when you are in a cult.
How would you define a good teacher? That's an interesting question, isn't it? For many of us, perhaps we might answer by saying what we think a good speaker is like. We might say the brother uses many illustrations in his talk.
No! Again, a good teacher isn't one that uses a lot of illustrations. It's one that can be easily understood by everyone. This is a morning worship speech by Jeffrey Jackson, member of the governing body, who's here to tell us what you need to do to be a good teacher. And by that, he means how to be a good manipulator.
You notice some of the qualities or attributes here that the Apostle Paul mentions as being very important with regard to our teaching. In verse 8, it mentions tender affection. So love is very much connected with someone having the ability to be a good teacher. In fact, to reach the heart of the student, we have to display love as well, don't we? Without reaching the heart of the student, if we're trying to teach, it's like enjoying a meal in a dream. There really is no benefit at all. So if we teach but don't reach the heart of the student, then it really is very little value to the student.
To Jehovah's Witnesses, teaching isn't about exchanging ideas and learning something new. As Jeff just said, all of that is useless if you can't reach the heart of your student. Jehovah's Witnesses believe teaching equals convincing other people. So when people don't agree with their teachings, Jehovah's Witnesses believe they aren't listening. This prevents them from waking up because if the issue is that they aren't listening, then it's solved with more indoctrination. That way, they don't have to explain anything logically. They simply need to learn to accept what they're being taught because that's how they show that they're listening, by obeying unconditionally.
And no doubt, we've all tried to display that, perhaps, as we're trying to teach someone something about the scriptures and we come across the thought that this person doesn't really accept it. We state the fact, we show a scripture, but still they may have a problem. Well, how do we react? You see, if we were to demand that they accept what we say because we said it or because the scriptures say it without reasoning with that person, then really we don't have that gentleness that the Apostle Paul is referring to here. So that stability under pressure to, in a loving way, convince someone of something that perhaps they're not so responsive to.
I only wish they were this upfront about their Bible studies when they're out on the carts advertising them. Now, it's not like the Jehovah's Witnesses are still converting people on the street. As far as I can tell, they haven't done that in like 20 years. This advice is only followed when they're indoctrinating their own children into the cult. And unfortunately, this makes parents think that obedience is the same thing as listening, because this way of teaching will permeate all other aspects of the relationship if the Jehovah's Witness follows the religion closely.
So Bulgaria was behind the Iron Curtain, a communist country. Literature about God and the Bible is not acceptable and banned. And so you can't just mail it. So as literature became available, people have to take it in. My family was one of those families that volunteered to do that. We traveled into Bulgaria by train.
We have a lot of luggage because every time we will go to Bulgaria, we stay 2.5 months. That was the summer vacation.
In that luggage, in various places, we put literature. Traveling into a country with banned literature is not without its problems or dangers.
They knew that we had some literature, and that was the track.
My mother realized that we were going to be searched. We had the ability then to take the literature out of each luggage that we had hidden it and to put it into one small briefcase. And what we couldn't, as unfolded tracts, we put around our arm with our overcoats over it.
I was only worrying about how I can hide that literature so he cannot find it. Because if he will find it, then really there are consequences.
So as the guards would search through the luggage, they rifle through it, they don't straighten anything out. So my mother quickly thought and asked them, can I now go over there and straighten out what you've messed up? And they said, okay.
And I took my tracts, which I had around my hand, and I put it in the already checked bag over there.
One of the guards gets to the point that it's my little briefcase. He says, this is so small, nothing could be in here, and he just takes it over there.
The man who was looking up was getting very nervous because he knew we had something, but he was not able to find it.
These were some of my favorite stories when I was a young Jehovah's Witness, the stories of smuggling literature through evil security. But after reading the kind of crazy stories that they were printing back then, even jw.org wants to disappear that information, because you cannot find that information anywhere. It's so embarrassing that it's been removed not by communism, but by the religion itself. I would also make fun of what's supposed to be a miracle that they didn't open the one place where they were hiding their stuff, but as an atheist, I rarely feel closer to God than when the authorities miss the one bag where my stash is and conclude I'm not carrying anything. This isn't an admission of guilt, by the way. You can't prove any of this.
To this day, my mother continues her spiritual routine of worshiping Jehovah, being at the meetings, preparing for the meetings, reading her Bible, and zealously sharing the truth with others.
It helps me practically every minute in my life. And I want to use my last energy to make his will known.
This lady was promised that she wouldn't age in the system of things if she committed her way to the Jehovah's Witness way, and she ended up wasting her whole life trying to get others to do the same. This is what awaits every Jehovah's Witness who remains faithful to the religion. Not everlasting life, but a wasted one. And that's what the music video is all about.
Would she have thought of all she'd given before? Of easier times when she had the means to give so much more. She drops in her coins, unheard by others around. But for Jehovah God, this small gift made a thunderous sound. No matter how small, don't wonder at all. Does he notice my sacrifice? It's not hard to believe if we see how he sees, if we see through Jehovah's eyes. Two small coins, he looks far beyond what you and I see. He knows who we really are underneath. He sees all we can be. No matter how small, don't wonder at all. Does he notice my sacrifice? It's not hard to believe if we see how he sees, if we see through Jehovah's eyes. Two small coins. Do you see through Jehovah's eyes?
This music video is about real people wasting their whole lives pretending their efforts will convert anyone other than themselves. It's insane how they show real images of real people, but they can't show a real image of someone converting because they just don't have one. I maintain that if even one person had been found and converted through the tens of millions of letters that the witnesses have made, they would have already flown the whole crew to record it. If they have to dramatize it, it's because it simply does not happen.
The 39 publishers and pioneers in the Picting congregation send their love and greetings. From the world headquarters of Jehovah's Witnesses, this is JW Broadcasting.
And that's how this broadcast ends, with Kenneth Flodin not resisting the urge to add a little flourish like the ones he loves doing to feel special. This was as bad as the average JW Broadcasting episode, with reminders of thought control, children indoctrination, and a few surprisingly useful tips for smuggling. Thank you so much to my supporters right here. You can join them if you want to help me make more videos like these. I'm trying to make as many videos as I humanly can, so I've been editing all day most days, and my supporters help me spend as much time as possible analyzing, dissecting, and editing spiritual food to have it ready before Jehovah's Witnesses analyze it in the midweek meeting. Because no one listens to the Jehovah's Witnesses like an apostate.